when you have free speech and you believe people should have the right to be able to voice their opinion against anyone they disagree with, is it actually possible for it to actually go too far? Right now, there seems to be a serious case that actually can happen, at the very least with a certain group of people. Because recently, a few days ago, whilst performing, an artist decided to chant death to the IDF. Can that can you really be covered by the idea of free speech? Obviously, some people agree it is still free speech, regardless, and also it needed calling out. And some people obviously disagree it is inciting violence. What really is it though? But before getting into the debate and the aftermath of the whole situation, if you're new around here, subscribe to the channel. And also, if you like the content, drop a like.
Let's get the thoughts of my panel, journalist and broadcaster Linda Jubilee, the former Labour Special Advisor Paul Richards, and the former Scotland Yard detective Peter Bleksley. Peter, with a tie like that, I'll have to come to you first. Well done.
Thank you.
Patriotic man on the panel. What do you make of these scenes we've seen at Glastonbury tonight? Not very patriotic, I guess.
I just feel for the member of staff from the festival organisers who will have got off the phone and said, "We've got Bob Dylan," only for that clown to turn up.
Yeah.
I mean, really. I mean, just this is where we've got to in 2025, when, of course, the arts and culture have always been edgy and politically challenging. In fact, I think that's part of the reason why the arts and culture exist, to challenge. But to stand up on a stage in front of thousands...
I mean, to be fair though, right, the history apparently of Glastonbury, the whole event, right, it seems to actually have political like ties to it. Okay, so that seems to be something that I actually like kind of like realized, like, oh, there seems to be some sort of like political awareness from this whole Glastonbury organization, right? You could also make the argument that, hey, what is going on, what the guys actually advocating for is really important, you know, the whole genocide and stuff, right? Like, eventually something needs to be done about it. But I don't think that's actually probably what people actually necessarily have a problem with. It's the step further than that says death to the IDF, right? That seems to be, it's like, if you really want this situation to be sorted, chanting death to the IDF doesn't really get you anywhere apart from actually like criticism. Criticism seems to be the only thing that actually gets you. You do need people on the other side that disagree with you to actually come to the table and actually sort out this whole mess that you're advocating for. By saying this, like, how does it get you anywhere closer to your objective? How does that actually work? That kind of is my problem with this. Like, how do you actually get people to actually be able to solve the problem that you're talking about? If you're saying death to the IDF represent the people that Palestinians are actually against. Like, how do you actually like come to some sort of reconciliation on that?
Thousands and thousands of people and chant for death. I think now there will be the on-duty lawyer from the CPS.
That's definitely too much. Like, free Palestine and everything. Yeah, sure, you can say that. Like, freedom of speech, right? You can say free Palestine. You can advocate for Palestine. Oh my God, there's genocide happening. You can do all this. Like, you can do everything. But saying death to the IDF, that probably seems a bit too far. That genuinely seems a bit too far.
Yes, that covers Avon and Somerset. Going through the statute books, seeing what offence can we find that would suit these circumstances.
I was going to say, as a copper then, you'd expect, a former copper, you'd expect somebody to be nicked tonight.
Well, I would expect the CPS to be very carefully looking at the footage. Of course, it's a different circumstances from a demonstration, for example, because that set has finished now. And that pathetic performer is probably on their way home to whatever hovel it is that they live in. So there's not an instant breach of the peace. There's not public order offences being committed in the here and now. So it would have to be a piece of legislation that would fit the circumstances retrospectively.
OK, Linda Jubilee, do you have sympathy for the BBC here, or is it yet another Beeb gaffe?
I don't have sympathy for the BBC, and in general terms, I think the licence fee should go, and this is one more reason why that should happen. But I do think here that the big irony here is that October the 7th, and Paul and I were talking about this before we came on air, is that some of those heinous crimes were committed at a music festival where people attending...
That is a good point. That is very ironic, considering where this whole conflict recently actually started.
Music festival were actually running towards the terrorists, the Hamas terrorists, to give them a hug, and were then mown down in the most merciless fashion. Now, the people attending this concert, listening to these chants, need a short, sharp lesson in geopolitics, and they need to understand what's going on here. Because I fear that what happens is the more you see of this kind of behaviour, we can call it out, but I have a horrible fear that it kind of normalises it, that you kind of get used to it. The way we got used to protests every Saturday on the streets of London, sooner or later we get used to these...
As long as the protest is peaceful, there is nothing wrong with it, okay? Being able to protest peacefully is one of the main foundations of free speech, okay? It allows people to actually be collective together, have some sort of power to be able to actually send some form of demand to the people in power. Like, hey, we're really, really unhappy with this. Peaceful protest is totally fine. The protests around the whole street of Free Palestine, that's totally cool by me. That's totally fine. Free speech. People should be able to advocate for what they think is wrong. Like, it brings the conversation to the table. I think that's totally fair. Free Palestine. In the whole thing, if you want to be political, that's also fair. That's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. If they believe something wrong is going on and it needs to be called out, there's nothing wrong with it. But the step too far is probably saying death to the IDF. That's probably a step too far. It doesn't get you anything apart from inciting more like conversation that around like is this like it doesn't really get you anything. That's the problem.
Chants all the time.
Yeah, look, I'm of course all for free speech. I've got no problem people protesting Israel for whatever they think. But Jeremy Corbyn was at Glastonbury yesterday, and he said to the crowd, "Look at the wall that surrounds this festival. There's a message on it saying build bridges, not walls." I mean, first of all, losing the irony that it was scrawled on a wall in the first place, but. Paul, these guys, the left in particular, they preach love and tolerance. In actual fact, they are the most hateful group of people I think I've ever come across.
Well, that is no part of any left that I would recognise.
Well, they are. They're militant leftists. Bob Vylan, whatever the hell.
Generally, like it is a political movement on the left. Generally,
utterly beyond the pale. I've been fuming all afternoon since the guy did his so-called act, but I'm also fuming about the idiots in the crowd who then responded and chanted the same.
Yeah, that was actually very, very weird to me because I thought, okay, Free Palestine, okay, they will say that, that's fine, that's totally cool. That they probably all support that. You could see the flags there, right? But then when it said death to the IDF. Initially, people didn't actually say it back. They were like, whoa, like, what can we really say that? Because, like, internally, intuitively, you could tell some people were like, whoa, like, the chants that was death to the IDF probably wasn't even as loud as Free Palestine. Like, some people definitely were cautious. You could tell that, whoa, this probably it's a step too far. You could see it by people's reaction.
Chants back, and I wonder if the police can use face recognition on the crowd and actually go through the tapes and see who was chanting it. It's not just the artist who should be banged up for this. It should be the people in the crowd waving the flags and making the chants.
Right.
So your point on the BBC, I mean, Tim Davie has had a difficult conversation with a cabinet minister this evening already, and the government's going to move swiftly on this. And I've just had contact with Yvette Cooper's office as well, and they're moving fast on this. So action will be taken at that level of the BBC. Tim Davie is a perfectly nice man at a personal level. But, I mean, as the man in charge of the BBC, he has got to take action on this and work out what on earth went wrong. And it has been a massive mistake. Peter's quite right. Normally these programmes have got some sort of time delay or something that can cut off before it is broadcast to millions. And yet that death chant was broadcast to the nation, and that's totally wrong.
I'm not sure about this, and I don't know whether Peter could clear this up, but you could possibly charge the singer, Bob Vylan, or members of the audience with malicious... malicious communication. I don't know whether that works in this...
I'm not sure that can actually work, because considering the IDF don't actually exist here. They don't actually exist. They exist in another part. Like, how does that actually work? How do you actually ground the laws of the United Kingdom on someone that was making a claim about another... I'm not really sure that would really work. If IDF was an institution from this country, then it will probably make sense, right? But they're all over there. Like, I'm not sure you can actually use that. I'm not sure.
It's inciting violence, isn't it?
It's inciting violence. Absolutely bang to rights.
Against IDF, how is that ever going to work? How would you... How can you be violent against IDF? They're all the way in, Middle East. Like, how is that going to work? That's the problem. Inciting violence, yeah, sure. Against who? People in the Middle East. How are people ever going to be able to actually carry out this violence that you're talking about?
Which is why the CPS will be very hurriedly going through the statute book, thinking which piece of legislation fits these circumstances, because obviously they won't want to get it wrong because it's going to be so high profile.
Yeah. OK, we have gone to the BBC on Ben Leo tonight. We've not heard anything back yet. I suspect they're, trying to formulate a response or something. But yeah, as soon as we get that response, if we do get it tonight, I will share.
I mean, like, this at the end of the day, people believe free speech should be a thing, but can it be too far? Can it really be too far? Like, I think generally, when we say free speech, we don't mean at the extreme end, right? There are probably some things that you don't want the umbrella of free speech to actually be able to cover, like things like purposefully using misinformation to tarnish someone's whole picture and credibility. Free speech cannot cover that, okay? Purposely doing that, free speech clearly cannot cover that. So clearly there has to be some restrictions. Does this actually fall under the idea of free speech? Probably not. But that's just my thoughts on it. If you're new around here, subscribe to the channel. And also, if you love the content, drop a like.